What would you say to perhaps some of the right-wing tabloids who might write this up as a ginormous waste of money?
Well, the question is it a waste of money if we save the lives of women and girls? Are we that dispensable? It would be pretty outrageous for them to say that. This is a public health service. We are protecting citizens from on-street sexual harassment. That's worth every penny.
But down to talk about your Just Don't campaign.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really exciting that we've got to a point. We launched it on Tuesday, and it's a campaign for 14 to 21-year-old boys and men, talking about male behaviour change, that we're trying to get a conversation between men to talk about sexual harassment of women, and hopefully this will spark that conversation that then will, really help us change behaviour, because we know that 86% of women have experienced sexual harassment in public. 1 in 4 women have experienced rape and sexual violence. As the only woman metro mayor in the country, I do feel that it's important that we tackle that head on.
I think those figures usually go over a lot of people's heads. 86% of women have experienced some kind of sexual harassment. I mean, that's mad. And then I would ask you, why not focus on them? Why is this a male-led campaign?
Well, we are talking to women. We're doing lots of interventions for women and around women's experience. But this is just one part of the jigsaw, that men are our allies. I love men. I know that they're going to be part of the solution, that we won't get change unless men come with us and help us.
And how can men come with women? How can they work with them?
Well, it's that low-level conversation that doesn't get called out, that then becomes acceptable, and that then sometimes spins into more violent actions. So we're saying to young men and boys, have that conversation with your mates. Is this acceptable to say this? So the campaign is Just Don't. So a guy might say, I was just liking her photos. I was just saying she had a great bum. I was just asking her to smile more. I was just, stroking her arm. I was just moving her hair. Or I was just close to her on a tube. We're saying, it's not banter. It's not funny. It's not okay. Just don't.
And there's a big distinction, isn't there, between liking someone's photos on Instagram and sexually harassing a woman? I mean, what would you say? I mean, there's a 15-year-old at home right now, and he's wondering, well, how do I get a girl to ask me out on a date then if I can't like her Instagram photos? Is that what the campaign is saying, or is it?
Obviously, if you have a relationship with someone, you're schoolmates, and you like someone's picture, I don't think that's a big deal. But when you start to like every single picture of her on holiday, you're stalking her on Instagram, you're identifying where she is on X, this is stalking. And what's been really interesting in West Yorkshire, we've got the first ever in the country stalking advocacy service. And stalking is the slow death, that when women are murdered, often stalking is part of that journey to that awful instance. And the Stalking Advocacy Service, we've spent over £400,000 on it. Already since October, 640 people have become part of that service. So stalking is not just following somebody through the streets, it is also harassing them and undue and unwanted attention on their socials. So it is about calling out that sort of behaviour and not dismissing it as, well, he just fancies her, he won't leave her alone. Actually, this is unwanted and you've got to stop.
Because it's weird, really, isn't it? Because you wouldn't find someone doing that. A young boy wouldn't do that to their male friends.
Well, this is exactly the point. This is very gendered. Now, of course, we know that there are boys and men that are sexually assaulted and get unwanted attention. And we have programmes and investment in that. But we know that 3/4 of these assaults, domestic violence, is unfortunately women. And I have a female deputy mayor, and together we're really focusing on making West Yorkshire the safest place to be a woman or a girl.
Wow. How does it compare to Sadiq Khan's Mate campaign?
Well, he and Andy Burnham, he's also got a campaign. They come at it from a male point of view. This is something that is very much from our lived experience, both Alison and I, and the research that we've done, that women actually value this conversation with men because they know they can't keep themselves safe, because keeping yourself safe means never being on the internet and never leaving your bedroom. Mm-hmm. So actually, we need men to help us. Please help us by sharing this video, talking to your mates about it, speaking to your dad, talking to your female members of your family. What do you experience when you go out the house? What does harassment look like for you? Because actually, it's been so interesting talking to male colleagues. So many men don't understand our lived experience of how horrendous it is on a day-to-day basis. When you go to college, you're in college, you go for a run, you go to the swimming pool, you go out for a night, there is harassment wherever you go. And actually, underneath the video, there is a comment section and lots of women saying 86% of women have experienced sexual harassment. Actually, for me, it feels like 100%.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's interesting to me about this campaign is that the week that it's come about, right? Mm-hmm. So we've just come off the back of these abhorrent Russell Brand allegations. And through all of this, I think a lot of men have been astounded by some of the clips resurfacing of Russell Brand. I mean, talking about flashing people in public, this is on this BBC Radio 2 show, talking about getting his genitals out and offering them to another woman, all of which is really shocking. But what surprised me is the male reaction to that. Most men not understanding that another person could act like that. I mean, is that the general feeling you get from this campaign? It's kind of a select few men rather than the general population.
I think this is why the campaign is looking at that low-level behaviour in the first instance of their video, because people don't associate that with them, all the stuff that Russell Brand is doing. Most men would say, well, I would never do that. But this low-level behaviour, which is not called out, can lead to that because it becomes acceptable. So people will then move on to something that is a bit more edgy, pushing the boundaries further. Nobody calls it out, so you move on to, well, I can just get my genitals out and nobody's going to call me out for it.
But more so it was tolerated. I think that's fascinating, isn't it? Because what you've got to do is get into the psyche of men to call it out. And actually, that's quite frightening. If you're a man in a workplace and perhaps your colleague is harassing one of your female colleagues, it's got to take a lot of bravery, hasn't it, to come out your shell and call it out.
But also what is seen as banter. If nobody is laughing but you, then it's not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And the idea that in the workplace or at school, somebody could say, mate, that's not funny, or knock it on the head, or trying to get boys and men to help women to, push back in that situation. Because if you're isolated, you have to have enormous confidence to say, that's not appropriate, I don't want that, can you stop that? Mm-hmm. As the only woman often in a group of men. So I do think it's the low-level behaviour that we should be focusing on, that this campaign hopefully will start that conversation.
On public transport too, is that where you'll be rolling it out? Because...
Well, yeah, that's really important for us, that it's everywhere. So we're really pleased that Leeds United, Huddersfield Town and our rugby clubs, they're going to be screening it at matches to try and get that, that audience. But also, as the mayor, I have a responsibility for transport. So I was able to, we've developed an app that's on the M card. It's like our Oyster card, where you can tell us where you feel unsafe, and we collate that data. And then I'm introducing PCSOs on buses and in bus stations.
Really?
A bit like transport police on the rail network. And we've got 15 currently that are going to be rolled out so that women will feel safer on public transport.
That's huge. That's massive.
Well, it's devolution. It's power of the mayor.
Well, there you go.
Everybody should be a mayor. It's great.
I think that's the worst. So, we've been talking about, we haven't personally, but the narrative has been, why on earth don't women call out sexual harassment when it first happens to them? Why don't they report it? And this comes back to your low-level harassment, what you were talking about. If you're on public transport and someone gropes you, brushes past you, I would say a lot of women wouldn't think to report that. Mm-hmm. So this campaign is about getting other people who are on the carriage to say, what are you doing?
Exactly that. And I think it's the clustering of information. So our app tells us where those sorts of incidences that you may not report are happening and will help us have interventions. But it isn't right that we have to put up with it at that low level. Actually, it just gets you really down. It stops women flourishing. It means that young women, as they age, that their world contracts. Boys grow up and their world expands, and girls, it just seems to contract to their bedroom, because actually to go out at night for a run, would you do it, putting yourself in a vulnerable position? And that's why I was pleased to invest in research from Leeds University on safer parks, because the development of parks, women are an afterthought, our safety is an afterthought. And the research has now been implemented as far and wide as Scotland and Cornwall and internationally, that these public spaces also should be safer for women and girls.
You've had a huge issue in Leeds, as many cities do, with spiking. So you're offering a service basically for women to get home and know that there's someone that they can contact if they need to, right? So this clustering service, they can report. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, what we've got with spiking, it was really interesting that we had a round table with university students right at the early on in my mayoralty. And the police, I think, were really shocked at the level of spiking that goes unreported. So that's why we've invested in hubs, safe spaces in city centres at night, where women can go if they feel they've been spiked, if they need their phone charging, if they feel unwell. And we had the first case of a woman who had been followed out of a bar, and she went to the safe space, and she was protected and the police were called. So working with the police has been very helpful. And I'm really lucky that West Yorkshire Police are an outstanding police force, and they're bought into our strategy of violence against women and girls. And they're working with us on what's called public protection orders, where there's a whole area where there has been a high level of harassment, so catcalling, on-street harassment. And it's resources are poured into that particular area. And catcalling is police are stopped. There is undercover police officers, female, that then it draws in police resources. But what is really good is that when they then target it's primarily men, catcalling and harassing women, they often don't have car insurance, or they have drugs in the car,
Right.
or they are wanted for something else. So it's also a way for police to keep women reassured and safe, but also to capture people who are also breaking the law in another way.
What would you say to perhaps some of the right-wing tabloids who might write this up as a ginormous waste of money?
Well, the question is it a waste of money if we save the lives of women and girls? Are we that dispensable? It would be pretty outrageous for them to say that. This is a public health service. We are protecting citizens from on-street sexual harassment. That's worth every penny.
That's a really good answer. Why do you care about the campaign as much as you do?
I think every woman has a story of what was the worst thing that ever happened to them. And for me, I was at university, and this is rare. A stranger tried to rape me in the street. And what is even more rare is that he was caught. He went to jail, he went to prison, and I got justice. He wasn't my brother's mate, he wasn't my boss, he wasn't my husband. And I didn't have to live with that. I got justice. Now, I know that not enough women get justice. And certainly when I was in the police station the following morning after all the investigations and everything, and a young woman came to the desk and said, "Oh, we found this shoe in our garden. Last night we heard screaming." And I went up to her and I said, "That is my shoe. Why didn't you come out and help me?" And she said, oh, we were too scared. I said, we? She said, yeah, me and my flatmates. And what is really shocking is that we as women are too afraid for our own safety to help others. So I feel obligated as a woman with power and as the mayor, some money, that I can help other women. And I won't be ever at that counter saying, you know, we heard something and we couldn't do anything. So unfortunately, that happened to me, but in a way, it also politicized me and led me on my journey into politics, into the women's movement and so on. But I know that most women have some sort of version of that, you know, they were, you know, sexually assaulted, or they were in a situation they didn't want to be in, but they'd had too much to drink, so they felt too guilty to call it out. You know, it's very complicated, but I'm in a privileged position, so I can make my voice heard.